There is a war happening inside you, a war you were never told about, not in school, not at home, not by society. It doesn't involve weapons or enemies. It's a war between the self you show the world and the self that you buried to survive it. From the moment you were born, the world began shaping you. It handed you a mask and said, "Wear this or you won't be loved." You learned to be polite when you were angry, quiet when you wanted to scream, to smile when your soul was breaking. Piece by piece, you abandoned yourself, not because you were weak, but because you were afraid of being rejected, afraid of being too much, afraid of not being enough. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely," and it is terrifying. Because to accept yourself completely, you must first face the parts you've denied, the rage, the lust, the envy, the sorrow, the animal inside, the parts you exiled so long ago that you forgot they were ever yours. But they didn't disappear. They became your shadow, and they've been fighting to be seen ever since. This is the hidden war within, the battle between who you truly are and who you've been told to. Every moment of guilt, every panic in the dark, every time you sabotage your own happiness, that's your soul crying out beneath the mask. You are not one person, you are many, and they are all fighting for a voice. Until you turn inward, until you look at the battlefield of your own psyche with brutal honesty, you will never know peace, because you cannot heal what you refuse to see. You cannot become whole by pretending to be half. This is not the beginning of self-help. This is the beginning of your return, the reckoning with the self you lost, the self you were always meant to be. There's a part of you that never got to breathe, a version of you that was silenced before it could even speak. That part still exists, beneath the roles you play, beneath the image you've carefully constructed to survive. You didn't create the false self to deceive others. You created it to protect yourself. As a child, you learned quickly. Love was conditional. Approval came with performance. Affection was given to the quiet one, respect to the obedient, safety to the compliant. So you became what they needed, not because you wanted to, but because you had no choice. That was your survival instinct. That was your soul armoring itself against rejection. Carl Jung wrote, "We all wear masks, and the time comes when we cannot remove them without removing some of our own skin." And that's the terrifying truth. The false self becomes so ingrained, so practiced, that you forget it's a performance. You lose track of the real voice under the noise. You laugh when you want to cry. You succeed while feeling empty. You say, "I'm fine," even as your soul screams for air. You became the peacemaker, the achiever, the caretaker, anything to be worthy. But in the process, you abandoned your anger, your desires, your boundaries, your wildness. You locked them away like dangerous animals, never realizing they were sacred parts of your being. Without them, you are not whole. Only a fragmented shell of someone who once had fire. And so the mask begins to suffocate. The smile feels forced. The life you build starts to feel like a cage. This is the price of the false self. You may be liked, but you will never feel seen. You may be praised, but you will never feel alive. The world taught you to betray yourself and called it success, but that betrayal leaves a wound, a silent ache that follows you into every room. And the longer you wear the mask, the further you drift from who you really are. You weren't born to be accepted. You were born to be real. The path to freedom begins not when you put on a better mask, but when you finally take it off. You were told to hide your anger, your desire, your darkness, but those were your soul's deepest truths. There are pieces of you buried in silence, wild emotions, forbidden thoughts, cries that were never heard. You didn't throw them away. You were told that anger was dangerous, that desire was shameful, that sadness was weakness. So you locked them up, deep in the basement of your being. You smiled while your shadow screamed. But what you suppress doesn't disappear. It waits, it festers, it grows teeth in the dark, and one day, when you're most fragile, it rises, not to destroy you, but to remind you of what you abandoned. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of yourself you were forced to exile in order to belong, and he warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Your shadow is not your enemy, it's your neglected self. The parts of you that felt too intense, too raw, too real for a world obsessed with perfection. Rage, it was your boundary being crossed. Jealousy, your soul crying for recognition. Lust, the raw life force you were told to fear, but instead of listening, you were taught to judge. So you buried these feelings, and with them, you buried your power. This is why you feel hollow, why success tastes like dust, why relationships feel shallow. Because you're not living as a whole person, you're living as a fragment. And the parts you reject don't stay quiet, they sabotage. They leak through sarcasm, anxiety, addiction, depression. They cry out for reunion. The world told you to be good, but your soul doesn't want good. It wants truth, and truth is messy. It's emotional, it's fierce, it's divine. Only when you reclaim what you've been taught to hate can you begin to feel whole again. This is not easy work. It's not beautiful. It's brutal. But in that brutality there is a strange grace. The shadow is not a curse. It's a doorway, not to darkness, but to light you can't yet see. What you fear within you is not a monster. It's a mirror, showing you everything you are meant to become. The fragmented soul, how you became a stranger to yourself. Every lie you tell to fit in costs you a piece of your authenticity. There is no greater loss than the slow betrayal of who you truly are. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. It's quiet. It begins in childhood, when your tears were too much, your anger unacceptable, your uniqueness inconvenient. You learned to survive by becoming what others wanted. You smiled when you were hurting. You agreed when your soul screamed no. And piece by piece, the fragments of your soul were scattered. You became a stranger to yourself. Carl Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But how can you accept what you no longer recognize? The parts of you that were shamed were not destroyed. They were exiled. Hidden in your unconscious, buried beneath layers of conditioning. They wait. Your wildness, your fire, your vulnerability, your truth. You did not lose them. You abandoned them because you had to. The tragedy is that the world teaches you to wear masks so well, you forget they're masks at all. You call it maturity, responsive fitting in, but underneath the performance is a sacred silence, a soul that remembers what you gave up just to belong. This fragmentation is not just emotional, it's existential. You feel disconnected from life, from meaning, from passion. You wonder why nothing satisfies, why every success feels hollow. It's because you are starving for your own truth, and no achievement, no relationship, no approval will ever fill that void. This is the hidden grief of modern life. Millions walking around with smiles on their faces and broken souls inside. The process of individuation, of becoming whole, begins when you finally stop lying to yourself, when you stop chasing who you should be and start remembering who you are. When you gather your lost pieces, not to be perfect, but to be real. You are not broken. You are buried beneath the masks, the shame, the roles. There is a wholeness that never left you, but you must go back for it, because the price of staying fragmented is your life, and the reward of becoming whole is your soul. What is individuation? The sacred process of becoming whole. Jung called it the path back to your true self, the soul's rebellion against conformity. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not about fixing yourself. It is the radical act of becoming yourself entirely, unapologetically, painfully whole. Carl Jung didn't promise that individuation would make life easier. In fact, he knew it would tear apart the illusions we cling to for safety. He wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain, because individuation is not a comfort. It is a crucifixion of the false self, of the mask, of the quiet lies you've told yourself for years to keep the peace, to fit in, to be liked, to feel safe. The process begins when the soul revolts, when the ache of pretending becomes unbearable, when you wake up and realize the life you've built, the job, the identity, the relationships, is a cage, not a home. You feel the tension between who you are and who you were told to be. That friction is the spark of individuation. It's not just psychological, it's spiritual. It's the deep, primal knowing that something within you is buried alive and screaming to be seen. Individuation is facing your shadow, the repressed, rejected, feared parts of you. It is unmasking the persona, the version of you shaped by survival, not truth. It is listening to dreams, following inner symbols, trusting the mysterious wisdom of the unconscious. This is not a journey for the weak. You will lose friends. You will outgrow roles. You will break more than once. But every fracture will lead you closer to your essence. Every confrontation with your darkness will illuminate a deeper light, because what you seek is not outside. It never was. The peace, the purpose, the power, they have always lived inside the parts of you you were taught to abandon. Individuation is reclaiming those parts. It's the soul stitching itself back together, not into perfection, but into authenticity. You don't become someone new. You remember who you've always been. And when you do, when you stop hiding, when you stop fragmenting, the world cannot own you. You become sovereign, rooted, whole, not safe, but real. And that is what it means to live. Why individuation feels like dying. You must let go of the identity you've clung to and mourn who you thought you were. Carl Jung once said, "In each of us there is another whom we do not know. He speaks to us in dreams and tells us how differently he sees us from the way we see ourselves." To begin the path of individuation is to confront that stranger within and to admit that much of who you thought you were was a defense, a story, a survival strategy. That realization is shattering, because the ego, the mask you've worn, doesn't go quietly. It begs to survive. It clings to titles, relationships, roles, opinions, and narratives. It tells you, "This is me. I am this." And when you begin to question it, the ground beneath your identity starts to shake. That's why individuation feels like dying, because in a way it is. You are not losing your life, but your illusion of self. And illusions die screaming. You mourn the person who always said yes to be liked. You bury the people pleaser. You kill off the coward that stayed silent to avoid conflict. You grieve the dream that was never truly yours. You let go of the version of you that existed only to be loved and start becoming the one that exists to be true. This is not a graceful process. It is rage. It is grief. It is sitting in the dark, wondering who you are without your masks, your routines, your attachments. Is losing the approval of others and gaining the approval of your soul. And still you must continue, not because it's easy, but because anything less than authenticity now tastes like poison. What dies in this process is the false self. What is born is something raw, honest, sacred. You begin to speak with your own voice, feel with your own heart, live with your own mind. And though the world may not understand you, though it may label you difficult, rebellious, arrogant, or broken, you are finally alive. Individuation is the sacred death before rebirth. It is the ego burning in the fire of truth, and on the other side, the soul walks free. The alchemy of the psyche, merging light and shadow. Real transformation begins when you stop trying to be good and start trying to be real. Carl Jung wrote, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. We are taught from childhood to choose the light, to smile when we're angry, to obey when we want to scream, to be good even when it suffocates us. We learn to split ourselves, to exile our rage, our lust, our envy, our pain, and to wear a mask of virtue so others will accept us. But that mask becomes a prison. The psyche, divided against itself, begins to decay. The more we suppress, the more our shadow grows teeth. It creeps into our relationships, our addictions, our moods. It sabotages the very peace we pretend to have. To heal, to transform, to become, we must turn in. We must become alchemists of the soul. The alchemy of the psyche is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. And wholeness requires that we reclaim what we've abandoned within. Asking for help is a common. You must face your own darkness, not to indulge it, but to understand it. You must learn the language of your anger, the intelligence of your fear, the honesty of your jealousy. These are not flaws. They are signals. They are messengers from the self you left behind. To merge light and shadow is to stop pretending. It is to stop trying to be what others want and start being what you are. Fully, fiercely, unapologetically, this is the painful miracle of individuation. You do not arrive at truth through perfection, but through integration. And yes, it is terrifying, because once you see all of you, not just the polished parts, but the wild, raw, hidden depths, you can never unsee it. You can no longer lie to yourself. But that is where freedom begins. Real transformation doesn't come from light alone. It comes from holding your darkness without shame, from dancing with it, talking to it, and letting it guide you toward your truth. This is the sacred fire of the soul, and in that fire, the real you is forged. Freedom and wholeness, living from the center of your being. Once you are whole, no one can control you. Not society, not fear, not even your past. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And yet most live and die as strangers to themselves. They walk through life wearing borrowed names, stitched from their traumas, stitched from expectations. Their steps are rehearsed, their emotions diluted, their desires caged. And in that numb obedience they lose the very essence that made them alive. But individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole, is the rebellion against that quiet death. To be whole is not to be perfect. It is to be true. It is to gather every fractured piece of yourself, the child you silenced, the anger you swallowed, the desires you were shamed for, and say, "You are welcome here." It is a return, a resurrection. And in that return you become something that terrifies the world. A sovereign soul. You are no longer controlled by society's scripts, because you've torn them up. You are no longer held hostage by fear, because you've stared into the abyss and found yourself still standing. You are no longer defined by your past, because you've confronted it, claimed it, and chosen to write your own story. Freedom is not found in rebellion for its own sake. It is found in inner alignment, in the stillness at the center of your being, where your soul speaks with a voice older than words. And for once, you listen. When you live from that place, something shifts. Your presence deepens. Your choices sharpen. You say no without guilt and yes without fear. You stop chasing approval. You stop explaining your existence. You become a quiet storm, unshakable, whole. And others may not understand. They may call you distant, difficult, intense. But let them, because in their confusion there is a hidden respect, the recognition of someone who cannot be owned. This is what it means to be whole. You do not belong to the world. You belong to yourself. And that is the fiercest freedom there is. The return of the soul. The journey of reclaiming the soul is not for the faint of heart. It is a path fraught with disillusionment, deep pain, and moments of overwhelming darkness. The world often tells us that success, wealth, and fame are the pinnacle of life, but none of these external markers can fill the hollowness that exists within when the soul is lost. To return to oneself requires a confrontation with the most intimate and terrifying parts of your being, the parts that have been buried under layers of distraction, denial, and societal expectations. This is the point where real transformation begins. It's not about becoming something or someone else. It's about peeling back the false layers until you discover what has always been there, your true, untamed essence. The external world, with all its pressures, has a way of conditioning us to suppress our authenticity. It tells us that we must conform, strive, and achieve in order to be worthy of love, respect, and fulfillment. But the more we chase these illusions, the further we stray from our center. We lose touch with the profound stillness that lies within, the place where true wisdom resides. The return to the soul is therefore a reclamation of silence, of inner sovereignty, and of conscious presence. It requires that we willingly descend into the darkness of our unconscious, confront the shadows we've neglected, and embrace the chaos of what it means to be truly alive. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This quote is a profound reminder that the true journey is not one of external accomplishment, but of internal realization. To become who you truly are means shedding the illusions that have defined your identity and facing the raw, unfiltered reality of your soul. The soul begins to rise once again. This is the return of the soul, the sacred process of reclaiming what was always yours. It is not easy. It is brutal, emotional, and often painful, but it is the only journey that will lead you back to wholeness. In this journey, you will discover that success and fame were never the answers. The true destination was always within, waiting for you to remember, waiting for you to come home.